Welcome to the WoW, Wings of Wisdom podcast, where curiosity meets inspiration. Brought to you by the Writing and Communication Center at Ashland University. In each episode, we invite a remarkable guest from our university community to share their journey, explore the power of communication, and unveil the strategies they use to guide students toward growth and success. Whether you're a learner, an educator, or someone captivated by the stories of triumph and discovery in the academic world, you're in the right place. So settle in, open your mind, and prepare to soar on the wings of wisdom.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of Wings of Wisdom podcast. Today, immerse yourself in a realm where art meets life's rich tapestry, as we're joined by the extraordinary Professor Dan McDonald, Chair of the Art and Design Department at AU. With a heart rooted in Utah and a spirit touched by world cultures, Dan is a maestro of art and design at Ashland University, bringing decades of passionate teaching, creative exploration, and heartwarming connectivity with students. A father, husband, and world traveler, he weaves narratives of paradox and wonder through a diverse array of media, leading minds on unforgettable journeys from the classroom to the vibrant landscapes of Italy. So, buckle up and get ready to dive into a world where art, family, travel, and a healthy lifestyle come together in the most exciting way.
Wow, what an intro.
What an intro.
Borrow that for my bio. That's what needs to happen. I know where you got some of the words from, and I appreciate you making up the other ones so that it sounds good.
Where did we get the words from then?
I don't know. Some of them sound like they're off the website bio.
Yeah, they are. Actually, I was surprised. And I have a question actually about one of the findings that I managed to discover from reading your page at AU. But I don't know. Chelsea, do you have any questions you'd like to start with?
Just kind of the background. So, Professor McDonald, you lived in France for a while, or Italy somewhere?
I lived in France and Switzerland.
Okay.
So my first trip in an airplane was to fly from Salt Lake City to Geneva, Switzerland, when I was 19 years old. And I was going on a religious mission, 2-year mission for my church. And sometimes you pull the short straw and sometimes you get the long straw. And I could have gone to Cincinnati, but instead I went to Geneva, Switzerland. And so that put me in Switzerland and France and the areas around Geneva. So part of Switzerland speaks French, about a third of the country. Most speak different versions of German. And then there's a little portion at the southern part that speaks Italian. And then there's a very small group that speaks a language unique to that area called Romanche. And it's Latin based as well, but it's closer to Latin than it is to say French or Italian or Spanish or something like that. So those Latin based languages have changed quite a bit. Romanche has stayed fairly true to the base language. And that allowed me to spend time in both France and Switzerland, mostly in the Alps regions of France, and then just the francophone, the French-speaking side of Switzerland. So that was about a little more than 2 years. I came home for about a year and then went back as a student and spent another year there. The student experience, back to France, actually back to a city that I had been in as a missionary. So that was a huge change because one, I didn't have to wear a suit every day, and two, my relationships with the people that I met were very different. When I spoke French to people, unless they were little children, it was always in the more proper form, the vous voix. We were purposely supposed to maintain a distance, and then of course now I'm with other 20 somethings, and it was a very different experience, even though I was with some of the same people that I had met before. So that was cool. The school experience was crappy. It was not what it was supposed to be. I was the guinea pig for an exchange program for Boise State University. So this roots in Utah, one place I will never go back to I swear this, so who knows what will actually happen, is back to Utah. I didn't like living in Utah. I'm from Idaho.
Oh, really? Okay.
And in the Boise area. And as I was sharing before we started recording, so my brother has a little company called Made in Boise, and usually it's written in the Iron Maiden font, you know, but he's had that. He's made these t-shirts for 20 some odd years.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow.
Kind of cool. But Boise State had been receiving French students for years, but no Boise State students had gone to France. And it was l'École supérieure de commerce. So it was a business school, but I figured there were classes I could enjoy anyway. I get there and it just doesn't function the same way. It's more of a program than it is a collection of classes to complete a program. So I wanted to take Italian lessons. I thought, it was listed as an option, but that particular term, they only had German, and it was only for 2 days as a review of what they'd done the semester before. So it's just kind of a cohort of students that go through this full program, and I was coming in the middle of it.
Right.
And it didn't work out very well. So I knew that I couldn't, with a clear conscience, return to the United States and get credit for these classes I thought I had signed up for, because I didn't actually take those classes. So I dropped out and stayed on a student visa anyway, and just became a full-time musician. And so that's what I did for the rest of that time. And
wow.
I was a professional musician for a little while.
What did you play?
Whatever was there playable. So I've never been great at any of these things, but I'm an adequate guitarist. I'm a decent bassist. I will sing when prompted. And so did those sorts of things. Sometimes the groups I was with were smaller and I would strap on the harmonica and we would play Americana music, and I played blues music. We played some soul funk sort of stuff like Stevie Wonder tunes. That's fun. If we had a keyboardist, we'd do that. If we didn't, we wouldn't. But
so your second time going back to France, then how long did you stay there? Was it a year or two?
it was about a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you didn't graduate from program in France. Okay.
No, so I came back. So I missed that year. That was just a gap year for me, really.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I didn't receive any credits during that time. I was signed up for classes at Boise State that was supposed to correspond to coursework I would take in France. And that coursework didn't exist in France. So I don't know if the school in France was, a little duplicitous, if communication was just unclear.
Right.
But what I had registered for wasn't even being offered for the most part.
Interesting.
So I just essentially withdrew from school and stayed in France. After I came home, I moved to Boston from there. Lots can happen in one's life when their plans fall apart and they're stuck in a foreign country. And so I needed to decompress, and my sister had moved to Boston, and I was thinking about this just yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Being able to fly in a system called Air Hitch. Have either of you heard of that?
No, not me, no.
It kind of went defunct around 2006, and it was really in a mess around 2000, but this all predates 2000. And what you could do is you could essentially buy a voucher that gave you an opportunity to have a standby seat.
Oh, okay.
And you would fly from major airports, so maybe Seattle, maybe Portland, San Francisco, and LA for sure. Once out of Salt Lake, maybe Chicago, then East Coast. And for like $129, you could fly one way from San Francisco to wherever it was going to take you in Western Europe. Like it just was from
the
West Coast to Western Europe. And sometimes they flew into Paris, but those were more popular flights. And so there often were not seats.
It's available. Yeah.
Flew into Stuttgart a couple times, or maybe it was Dusseldorf. I can't remember which one.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. Germany.
And then you just catch a train or hitchhike or whatever.
Wow.
When I was flying home for $69, you could get to the East Coast from Western Europe. And so my girlfriend and our collection of friends, we went up to Paris. I had to get to Luxembourg from there to catch my flight that went through Reykjavik and then landed in Boston. So I lived in Boston for another 7-8 months.
Oh, wow.
Decompressing.
So you were not taking any classes at that time, right?
At all. No. So I was an undergrad for 8 years. I was in school for probably 5 of those. And I was at risk of not receiving Pell Grants for the last year because I had so many credits.
Wow.
So my undergrad tally sheet might be close to 200 credits. It's
Oh, wow.
Oh my gosh.
pretty stupid. Now, some of that was when I came back from being a missionary, I found out I could test out of all the French classes. And I thought, well, that was easy. Let me see if I could test out of these music classes. Oh, that was easy. Well, let me test out of these. I went and over 2 semesters, I accrued about 75 credits because I just tested out of all these classes. And then the bill came. Like, I didn't realize you paid for some of those. Some just provided a waiver to get to the next level.
Oh, really?
Some were physical credits you had to pay for. And so that, it skews it just a little bit. I didn't know what I wanted to go into. I was telling everyone in France I was going to be an architect. And that's because I thought that was an art-driven area or design-driven area that I had heard from maybe the game of life. You could make some money, like you could be a doctor, or a lawyer, an architect, whatever. I can't remember if architect's even an option, but that's probably where I was getting these sorts of things, that I could make some money and
Right.
still be creative. And it's a straight line. You get that degree, that's what you go and do.
Right.
So, and it sounds cool in French, architecture, sounds great.
Right.
Suave, right? And then I get home and I'm like, I loved this interaction with humanity in a way that I'd never experienced. Like, I would hitchhike to Portland or hitchhike to San Francisco. Those were exotic places for me. And
Right.
And I lived a kind of a weird youthful life, but I really hadn't gone that far. Again, first flight was flying to do this missionary work. And I was with a lot of people who were pretty devout Americans. And I mean that in the worst possible way. And I had to react to that too. People that would walk down the sidewalks and go, watch this, and make all of the people from that country kind of move around our crowd of American dudes. And I hated that sentiment. And I grew to kind of resent some of what made us ugly Americans, but also recognized how people appreciated America as a concept and weren't necessarily judgmental. Though this was right after the Persian Gulf War. And I do remember people coming up to me in some of the more segregated neighborhoods in France. And when they figured out we were Americans, they just assumed we hated them because they were North Africans, they were Arabs, they were, whatever they identified with. There were very few Iraqis that I ever met but they would just assume we hated Iraqis. And I would respond back saying, I've never met one, I have no idea.
Right.
But there were others that didn't take that tone. And so I really loved what it did to me to have to open up to the people I was meeting with and to find what made them great, and to also identify what maybe made my heritage good. There were things I missed and I didn't think I would, right? So I had to, whatever. I could go on and on about that.
Right.
So when I came back, I thought I loved learning the language. And get me started, I'll get my accent back. It's still a little, I have to chew a little bit now because my mouth has to get used to actually articulate. But I felt like I devoted myself to trying to learn this language in a way that was passable. I didn't want to have a clearly American accent. I didn't want to feel like I hadn't shown respect for this language that the people who speak it really, really honor and cherish. And so I thought, I'm gonna be a French teacher. And that's what I focused on. But I was in Utah when I finally got to it. So I'm not rambling too much here, am I?
No,
you're good. You're great.
The story
is all great.
still cohesive. So I go back to Boise State. There's a new French teacher there. She's wonderful. Her husband is a phenomenal jazz guitarist. So I was able to take lessons from him.
Oh, wow.
And work well with her. But Boise State University had 17,000 students. She was the lone French faculty member.
Oh, wow.
And so taking classes at the rate I was at, like, it was going to take me another 3 years to get through the curriculum. And so because they were, the classes were just offered on a rotation. I had already
Right.
completed, the beginning and intermediate levels, and she had to teach those every year, and then she would teach an advanced level. So I get one advanced class every semester. So that's where I looked to transfer. And I wasn't really happy in Boise anymore. Most of my friends had moved on. The friends that were there, I thought were kind of doofuses. Hopefully they don't look at this podcast. And so I had friends from my mission that were going to school at Brigham Young University. And that's a school that's just, flourishing in languages, because you have all these young people that get sent out to these different countries and they come back and they want to get better at language. And so I transfer down there. And once I'm down there, I'm thinking I'm going to get this degree in French, but Utah had a terrible teaching license. Like, you get that license, you could teach in Utah. That was really it. And if you got a license in Oregon, it was recognized in 43 different states.
Right.
And so I thought, I will get my teaching license somewhere else, but I'm going to complete my degree in French here. But that was my plan. But I also loved history. I also loved music. I had an affinity for North African culture and music. And so I was taking classes there, things that I don't regret doing, but I feel a little, I feel bad about the very idea of getting, like, I have a minor in African educational development. Like, what in the world? Like, somehow folks who live in those countries aren't able to develop their own educational systems. You need some nut job from Boise, Idaho, some classes in Utah to come let you know how to build an education system.
So I actually had a question for you about that. So you're obviously a jack of a ton of different trades. Apparently you're a musician. You're a mechanic, architect, a plumber, I heard. So what do you have to say for students who, like you, have a ton of different hobbies, are interested in a ton of different things, so they don't know what to major in? What do you have to say for students like that, like you?
Well, I think the first thing is none of it is a waste. Okay, so whatever classes you take, the issue that I see in many, many students now is this devotion to taking things that only apply to their major.
Right.
And their major will be useless probably in about 4 or 5 years. It just changes so fast. It's hard for the universities to change their curriculum at the same rate that the actual professions change. So especially students that are in the more professional tracks, it's really hard to be prepared for what they will actually experience. Go get internships so you see what's really happening, and then come back and tweak. But learning about history should have nothing, let's say we're talking about Northern Italian history, has nothing to do with art history. I'm just making up some term, okay? Mm-hmm. Learning that seemingly has no bearing on whether or not I can paint a picture.
Right.
But I think most of the things that make us humans don't necessarily translate into dollars and cents, but they do give the making of the dollars and cents purpose. And that's a crappy, crude way to describe it. But most of the things that people might say I do outside of my normal job, I didn't learn but out of necessity. So that's a little harder to tell students, hey, go learn how to change the head gasket on a car. Mm-hmm. I had to do that because I had 2 children and I was living off like $12,000 a year. So, just you do what you can do to get by. And so you get a manual and you just learn how to do it. You find somebody that knows how to do it and you ask if they'd allow you to observe and watch. And I struggle with this with my own kids. I keep thinking, why aren't they here wanting to learn how to change brakes? But when one of the cooler things that happened in the last few months was when my daughter, who's now in grad school, I should be careful. I think she's 23, but yeah, she was born in 2000. She's got to be 23. So she said the car is making noise. Well, she's way too far away for me to come and help her with that.
Right.
So I asked her to lay out all the tools that she had taken with her. And then I had the same tools in front of me.
Oh, wow.
And I said, let's FaceTime and let's fix your brakes. And once she did one side, she could do the other. And this is really out of necessity. So at 23, she now knows how to change her brakes. And at one point she's like, I should just take this to someone. And I said, you should just call someone up and ask them how much it'll cost to do your brakes.
That'll change
And
your mind
she
real
calls
fast.
up and they're like, oh, it'll be about $650, I was like, so you just spent 2 hours doing this. What would you have to do with your life to make $650? Now,
Right.
once you're famous and you're great, you might consider doing that differently. But
Interesting.
anyway, I don't know how to do any plumbing because I went to plumbing school. I wish I had. I've just had a lot of homes that had leaky pipes.
Necessity, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. So with deciding, I think the term we use here is deciding students. What do you have to say about the financial rationale for, students, they have to take limited number or as fewer classes as possible and graduate with a degree, given the rising expenses of higher education?
Yeah, it's not fair, because when I was going to school, a Pell Grant covered my tuition. Now, I mean, not entirely. Like at Brigham Young, you have the LDS Church that subsidizes some of that. But at Boise State, I remember, like my first semester, I had a 1.1 GPA or something like that, because I understand economics. If I pay my tuition and it is paid for by my Pell Grant, covers everything, and I'm allowed to take 21 credits, it is only appropriate that I take 21 credits. Like, why would I waste that value?
Right.
Except, 21 credits, that's like 7 classes. And the midterms are all at midterm, like for all of them.
For
The
all of
final
them.
exams are all at the same last week, and there was a point where I had to just say, those 2 classes I will take over again, that kind of deal, and just had to stop going.
Wow.
So the financial implications are big. I think the bigger difference for me and the students I'm working with at AU is that I lived in a park for some of my time as a freshman. Like I didn't have to live on campus, but I was 10 miles away from where my parents lived. I didn't have a car, I didn't have a bike, and I didn't feel like walking. And there wasn't a public system. So I did sleep in the park probably twice a week.
Wow.
I would sleep at friends' houses. Like I don't encourage that, but it meant I didn't have the living expenses. That's really where the money goes. And then you have to think, am I getting the experience I want? Do I have the freedom that I maybe need from my family to maybe find a little bit more about who I am? What is that worth? So, I have 3 kids now that have gone through college or are in college. They've lived at home, they've lived on campus, and it's a different experience for sure. Even if living at home is less than a mile down the road, it's just a different experience than living on campus. So there's something of value to that. And it's an expensive enterprise, but there's something of value.
Right. For sure. Yeah.
So I also think students that seek out the easiest route, that's where I don't understand the value proposition. Why take the easiest route through the process? There are cheaper avenues for getting a piece of paper. Man, they should be milking every opportunity they have. I think the part that gets missed by most people, this is where, my old foginess comes in. You won't realize how little time you have to do the things that you could have done.
Right.
Once you no longer are a student.
Right.
And you have bills to pay, and you have meals to prepare, and you have, all of that comes crashing very quickly. And I hope every student is in such a position when they graduate that those are easy transitions. But those easy transitions translate into an 8-hour a day, 5-6 days a week work schedule.
Right.
And how do you go and say, I'm just going to try a philosophy class now? There are plenty of people that say you could learn all this stuff just by doing a Google search and just reading Wikipedia, or finding your own books and going up a notch from Wikipedia, I guess. But finding the time to do that is it's so hard. It's so hard. And
almost impossible. Yeah.
Throw a kid in there, throw real responsibility. It's so hard.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the real value is. You can never get that time back. And if the investment you're making is in the time to devote to learning in a very specific way, obviously, but
right.
then that's the real value of an education. And if you're coming in as a student and that's not the way you're approaching it, I think it's difficult to justify.
Right. Yeah. Now, speaking of AU, Dan, what has your journey been like as a professor here? And have you seen the art and design department evolve over the last decade or so since you've been here?
Yeah, no, it's changed quite a bit. We've been fairly steady for probably the last 10, 12 years, but there was a pretty sharp drop. Some of this is because of education. 2010, you had a big drop in education. 2008 to 2012 were dark years for, I think, for the teaching profession. And we haven't fully recovered from any of that. And so we may have gone from 20 graduates to 12.
Wow.
And that's still a pretty good number. 12 is not bad at all. But when you think of what that would mean, if you have 20, you have 80 students or more. And then if you have 12, you have like 50. And that changes dramatically what types of classes you can offer, especially with an increased pressure in having higher caps. And then you start putting courses on alternating years, and it changes a certain type of progression for those students. And so it changes the relationship with those students.
Right.
So when I first came here, I had a lot of non-sculpture majors in advanced sculpture.
Oh, wow.
Right now, advanced sculpture meets with the beginning sculpture students.
Why is that?
Because I don't have the ability to have a standalone advanced class. There aren't enough overall students to fill that class up. So I have to mush them together into another structure. I wish that weren't the case. So that's been probably the biggest change for me. I think the student population has changed a bit too. Some of it had already started, but some of it's a gender switch too. And that's not really that noticeable to me, other than, I recognize it, but it doesn't really change the educational process. But things like sculpture classes were almost exclusively male until like the mid-90s. And then all of a sudden, now I have almost exclusively females in my class. Again, it doesn't change the educational thing, but I notice it.
Right.
In fact, I find that most women become much better welders because they don't carry the baggage of thinking it's some sort of macho thing, and they have to be naturally, inherently good at such things. And so they take the time to practice. But we have changed some of our approach as an institution on what we view as, this is risky, but what we view as important. And I think we've tried to recapture little bits of it, but I think that makes it a little more difficult. I don't remember feeling like we needed to have a dedicated writing and communication program for classes. Like the classes had them, like just classes in general.
Embedded, yeah.
Yeah, but as we've kind of dialed that back for whatever reason, and I think some of it is a declining number of students. And so then how do you keep your enrollment numbers up? What does that change in our student profile? I think high schools changed quite a bit too. And so the things that they would focus on changed. I think also, how risky is it for me to be really critical?
We can record and then share with you and let us know.
Yeah, that's fine. But I mean, I don't mind saying it. I just don't want an audience that misunderstands what I might be getting at, because I'm not clear on it. But I totally understand why we have a push for CCP the way we do as a state and really as a society.
Right.
But what I've seen with my own children, and then what I've seen with the students that come in with CCP, they haven't had a class like the literature of the Holocaust. Those sorts of classes have died out in high schools, in most high schools. And instead you get CCP English 101.
Right.
And so the student isn't interacting with other college students when they're taking their composition classes. They're interacting with other high school students, and maybe that's fine. Some are coming and interacting with our students, of course. And those are often some of our better students, because those are students who I think want to be in those advanced honors classes, the AP classes that have been kind of whittled away in the high school curriculum. And this is what's afforded to. But there's something specific. Learning how to write feels like a skill that you just learn.
Right.
Learning how to find meaning in reading specific hard literature is a different experience entirely. And then writing about it, sure, you get that skill set. But the content that you're forced to navigate in doing so, I think that I feel like that's been lost a little bit. And I wish I didn't feel that way, but I do. And so I think that's been missing with the student population. And we see some of that with feedback from our first year experience class, right? Our first year seminar. And maybe that is something that can be overcome. That folks recognize that thinking deeply about things that aren't viewed as simply a skill set, but as something that challenges you beyond a tangible outcome. It serves a purpose that in the end actually becomes very, very tangible.
I think a lot of content-based courses have turned into mechanical procedures where students have to follow those, rubrics or what have you, and then just with the ultimate purpose of passing the course. And we see that in first year seminar, a lot of high school students or recent high school graduates taking the course, and they're struggling with that, going beyond the content and digging deeper to understand those concepts. I think that's something that we're, I think not just at AU, but across the board. I think a lot of recent graduates are struggling with that.
Is understand even a term that can be used in Bloom's taxonomy?
Well, it's
I mean, because it's not really, it's hard to measure such things. Right. So you can measure students will experience this, or they will be introduced to, or, things that can be measured and met.
Mm-hmm.
And I see the need for assessment, and it's hard, I think, to produce assessment that is, that bears fruit. And assessment tends to be something that is established to show success versus to better the product. But of course, the desire is that we have constant improvement.
Right.
Constant improvement means that you have to show constant improvement. So you keep creating things that can be met.
Yeah.
Not things that you fail at. And but yeah, it is crazy the kinds of conversations those that choose to have children will have with their children. And those topics come up in the strangest ways. And if your only skill set is based on these practical outcomes and a very limited number of things,
mm-hmm.
it gets harder to have those conversations. Or I guess you could learn with your kid in that moment. But if you want to be a resource for your child, it's really about thinking deeply about things you normally wouldn't think about, because suddenly you're not worried about which My Little Pony is the best one, and how do you make those determinations, and how do, it seems so silly, but those are things that come into play when you're having these discussions in classes that may not seem relevant. And then all of a sudden you're like, I had to come to a real conclusion on that based on fact, reason. And whatever.
I'm gonna switch gears a little bit, Dan.
Yeah.
I would like to ask you about the summer Italy trip. What can you tell us about that? I know that you're the lead on that initiative.
Well, just a lucky thing that happened because of good people on the board of trustees that are good people in real life, not just as as trustees. And they met someone who had an ambition to create a program that students who otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity could then take advantage of. So we have someone who has done very well for themselves in life, purchased a villa in Italy. There was a monastery on the property, and for a number of reasons, they elected to refurbish that monastery and turn it into an artist residency sort of space. I was then asked to go and visit that space because it was art-based. And so I go over there and I get to, my purpose for going over there was to find out what the real deal was, because they were going to offer that space for free and they were going to feed us for free. And I thought, no, people don't do that. It's like, it's going to be free with your $30,000 donation, to this cause or whatever. Right. But no, it's just out of the goodness of their hearts. They were providing this. And so we've taken advantage of it. We've tried to be extremely respectful of what they want to accomplish. And we have been, I think, because of the relationship that was built initially, we get twice what any other school is offered in that equation. Like most, it's come for 5 days. We stay for 10.
Nice.
Right. And you think about what that means. Like they have staff that maintain the space. They have a director that's there. They have a chef that's there, more staff that comes in. Just the utilities that we use, right? And they're giving that to us. So every student, I try to instill in them this understanding that what they're receiving is above what they can repay.
Right.
And so that also spurred an insistence that we figure out a way to have a service project while we're there. And that became the norm for any group coming through. So I was like, I really want to do this. Can we pull weeds in the vineyards? Can we, clear fields? And they're like, no, we have people that do that here, but let's see if we can branch out and find opportunities in the community. When I initially put it together, I thought, well, there's no way I would even consider this for CCI because we're actually separated out. We just happen to be in a beautiful place that offers this with the opportunity to go and be a tourist in a couple of cities from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't view that as critical cultural inquiry. I view that as visitation and then an opportunity to have maybe a scholarly reflection for a week or two in a beautiful place. But as we branched out and had these service projects, meeting with people from the community, trying to go and be more intentional in our interactions with folks, I conceded that CCI could be met with this trip. Right? So that has now happened. But,
can you give us some examples of those, service projects?
Look, so we were in Italy this last June. It was odd time. Normally we would go in May. End of June into July. And in Siena, which is the major city close to where we stay, we're out in the countryside, but it's about a 10, 15-minute taxi ride to get into town. And the Palio was taking place. So the Palio is this very unique horse race that if I'm just being really crude about the description of it, it's really like a way to experience gang warfare through a horse race. Like people are undercutting each other. They're paying people off. There's a protection order. When the horse runs, everybody's protecting that horse for fear that some other group would come in and harm the horse or harm all of that's happening. And it's been happening for, 600 years, but that was there. We were in the middle of it. We had exclusive observation opportunities, like up in fancy pants buildings up above the square. We're watching the race down below. Wow. We also were down in the thick of it, down in the groups. My son, who was on the trip, I think he was excited for the Contrada, the neighborhood horse that actually won. Like it may have very well been that he put like a little money down on it. I don't know.
Okay.
But when he said, yay, because they won, the group that was around us, two young ladies punched him in the kidneys for being positive about
I
that
didn't know
group, right?
that.
And, you know, he's like, what's going on? I mean, we were down in the thick of that. And there's a whole lot that happens in there. And all of that going on. We had dinner late at night. If you think of like Hogwarts, where the ceiling has gone away and the stars are up there, we had dinner with one of the Contrada up in the courtyard of the chapel, but actually within what was going to be the main portion of the chapel, but they never finished it. So you have the cathedral walls that are built up, but there's no roof. And we're out on these tables and they're singing and they're chanting and there's
beautiful.
I saw a horse get baptized, right? Just things that you wouldn't normally experience. And we all got to see that kind of stuff, right?
Wow.
But we're having dinner and it's late at night and it's just great. All those great things. I say all that to say that every student to the last student, their favorite experience of that whole trip was going to the convent and helping feed some of the homeless and the refugees that were in Seattle.
Wow.
And they didn't know what to do with us. You know, we show up, I think there were 17 of us for that day, and they didn't need 17 of us, but that was what was set up. And the Mother Superior that was there, I think kind of against her normal nature, she said, let me just show you around the place. So 4 functioning nuns, 40 or so that live there because of their age and you know, just whatever difficulties that they have. And she mentioned, because I speak just enough Italian to recognize some of the things she was saying. She didn't speak any English. She mentioned that she was frustrated that the grass was so tall when we went through one of the courtyards. And we went through a rose garden that was dedicated to Mary, and the rose garden was overgrown, lots of weeds, things like that. And then we get in this other courtyard and all these little patches of grass, and the grass was probably, 12 inches tall. And she's like, we can't keep up with it. We even have a gardener. We just can't keep up with it. It just drives me nuts. So I tell her that I will mow her lawn for her. I have time. And she just breaks down. She's like, really? Nobody's going to mow. And their lawnmower was, the guy that brought me the lawnmower, you could tell he was super proud that he had made this thing function, because it looked like a Frankenstein monster of, different sort of pieces of equipment. It might've been a blender that was on I don't know. So it was a curious contraption. But then the other students, they went and worked in that rose garden and they pulled the weeds. Okay, so this happens and it all works out great. Folks are giving out clothing to refugee families coming in, and they're from East Africa, they're from Pakistan, they're from Syria. Sudanese have been suffering, the Syrians, of course, for feels like a decade now. Right. All that kind of stuff, right? When we're done doing that, we're eating a little bit, some snacks that came out, and we're sitting down with all of these refugees. And some of them spoke English enough to be able to have conversations. And you find out they've been fleeing or trying to find a place to stop for 7 years.
Wow.
Folks whose homes were burned, their families were killed, they went on the run, and they're just trying to find a country that will let them stay, right? Students, they don't have that experience. They're not going to get it here in Ashland.
Right.
And to the last one, they said that was the most impactful thing that happened. So a long story to say, you never know what will actually trigger. Folks are probably, they didn't take pictures of that stuff. They took pictures of the Vatican. They took pictures of the cathedral in Siena and in Florence. But I think they imprinted more deeply the experience they had service project. And
that human experience is priceless.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Cannot put a price on that. Now, what do you say to students who are maybe reluctant to go on the trip because they don't speak Italian? Maybe they've never been outside the United States. What's your advice?
Well, the not speaking part is frustrating to me, not because they don't, but because I think we don't necessarily cater to someone who wants to learn that. If I could wave a wand, I would say that anyone going on a study abroad trip should study the language that is spoken where they're going the semester before. That's not going to happen.
Right.
And I don't think faculty agree with me on that, but I think it's important because I think it really is a window into the culture And I think it's a humbling experience to recognize that that you are the person who is out of order. You're the one that doesn't communicate well. And the worst thing that I think can happen in those experiences for anybody, to go in and be frustrated that another country doesn't communicate well with them, right? But we all get that. We want to get a slice of pizza, and this person gave us one with mushrooms when we didn't want mushrooms, but they didn't tell me it had mushrooms. Whatever. But maybe going back to that explanation of one of the things I got out of being a missionary was recognizing more and more who I was and how I fit in humanity. And it is hard to go somewhere new and not be judgmental. But I think it is hard to go somewhere new and not also judge yourself a little differently too. If you go, and some of the students had to get on a bus, right? A public bus, rush hour. And you're armpit to armpit, and everybody's had a long day and it's hot out and you're sweaty and you are now mingling in a way you don't want to mingle. And they haven't had that experience in the States because they all drive, like
they see.
Right. I mean, those things, it's easy to say, this sucks. I wish I didn't have to do this. Right. But at the same time, I think it's also, anyway, I'll repeat myself, but you start to question what makes the most sense, and what makes you, and what's important, and what's good. Here's a shocker. I had 3 people that were gluten intolerant that weren't while they were in Italy. I mean, even if that's all you get out of it, like, okay, maybe there's something different about the bread where I live versus the bread here, because I feel great and I've had nothing but, sandwiches and pizza. And if I have one little sandwich at home, I feel like my insides are getting ripped out. So I think it's worth just trying those things and exploring a little bit. One of the cool things at the monastery is that you are not going to get pizza and pasta for even most of the meals. You'll get some, but you get to realize that, just like America, not just all French fries and hamburgers. Italy's not just all pasta and pizza, and I think that's pretty cool too. It's a little thing, but it's a cool thing.
Right.
I think it's worth going to have the experience, to be uncomfortable, to be challenged. If that means you just go to New York City, go to New York City, right? That's another world from Ashland. It's another world from Cleveland. If you've never been outside of Ashland, go to Cleveland, right? I mean, just go find a spot that is going to be new and go there. And if you need to go full throttle, off the high dive, go abroad where you have a structure that's a little bit protective, and let someone else deal with some of the ramifications of changes of plans or whatever. But it's important for me on any trip that I would ever be part of, that students are as independent as we can allow and still feel safe.
Very good.
I'm not a fan of traveling via tour bus. That would never happen. I wouldn't be part of that sort of an arrangement. And there are plenty that work out just fine. And that might be what some students want. But I want students to navigate as if they were adults. And I want them to be frustrated as if they're adults and have to determine what they were eat, like adults do.
Right.
And have it all planned out for them.
And they are adults, right?
Yeah.
Chelsea, have you been on the Italy trip?
I have not.
Okay.
No.
All right, cool. Dan, I have tremendous respect for you, not just, for being amazing professor and chair and former interim dean, but also I see, a lot of aspects of your life as a father, as a husband, as a person who takes pride in his, fitness. So Could you give us a peek into your maybe your daily routine
He
that
looked
helps
at
you
us as
stay?
if he's shocked. I go to the gym in the mornings, and him and his whole posse are there.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. A Wednesday morning, okay.
Yeah, but I'm not feeling the gains like I feel like I should.
How do you stay productive though? Being a professor, being on so many committees and maintaining that balance in your life.
Well, I'm supposed to be on study leave right now, and it hasn't felt like that at all. I've been here 17 years. This is the first time I've taken one, and it's been difficult to actually wind down from the grind of the stuff.
I completely forgot that you're on study leave, and I apologize for
perfectly fine
calling asking this favor.
And then like this morning was weird. I had family in town over the weekend, and my daughter came into town from grad school. So this is my day today, is she had to be at the airport at 4:30. And then my family needed to be at the airport at 11:30. So I've taken 2 trips to the airport today. But then I was in the study abroad meeting because I'm on that committee. There seem to be a lot of things that kind of happen. I have not been the most motivated the last little while. But here's my primary thing. What keeps me going is that let me back this up. My sister, I bumped into Barb Schmidt-Reinhardt at the park the other day.
A former professor of Spanish, right?
Yeah, former professor of Spanish. And she decides to tell my sister something about, oh, well, Dan has done this and that and the other. And my sister described perfectly how I function. She said, so is it like this with all of you where he just gripes and complains, but then his heart is good, so he goes and does it anyway? Something like that. I thought, well, that sounds about right, But this is what gets difficult as years go on. The killer for me is apathy. Like, it's so hard for me to function in an environment that feels like it can't get better. And it's the same thing with my studio space. It got really difficult for me around year 7 because I couldn't think of a way to rearrange that room that would make it function better than it was at the time. I found a way. And so, okay, everything was better for the next few years. And I'm back in that state. Like, what do I change? What structure can I build to rearrange how I place things to try to make this function a little better? And those sorts of things are probably what keep me going. After a while, you start learning that sometimes that's naive, but it keeps a little fire burning. So how can we make something better on campus? How can we make something better for students? How can we improve some system or structure or classes or programs, support, whatever it might be? And so it's difficult for me to say no when someone says, hey, can you be part of this? I try to fight the hubristic notion that I'm being invited to do those things because I bring a solution to the table, or that someone else wouldn't have a better solution. Maybe it's just that I'm loud, and so folks think I might have something to bring. But as with learning how to fix cars or to drywall a house, I hope that I bring the ability to find some solutions, even if I don't have them. And so I join those groups and have those conversations, waiting to hear that great idea, or maybe be part of creating a great idea and finding a way to champion it or support it. I'm sure there are plenty in our AU community that would refute what I just said, that maybe all I am is just a thorn in the side, or
that's hard to believe.
But anyway, and the difficult thing about fitness, we have a fitness test in our little workout cult group twice a year. And this last year, for several reasons, I wasn't as good as I was the year before. And I started looking at myself saying, this is what fitness feels like, we've reached the mountaintop and it's just a slope down on the other side.
Or it could be just a bad day,
It could have just been a bad day. I have
test.
an injured wing over here, so
right.
but that's always been a thing. Like I can always run a little faster. I can always jump a little higher. I know it's not true, but I tell myself those things each time. And it's better to do that than to accept that you're getting worse. And
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Any final questions, Chelsea?
I don't think so.
Yeah, you made me feel bad, Dan, now. Like I thought about the study leave and
oh, please no.
pulling you away
No.
from your family, and we appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
I have had a resting heart rate of probably over 100 for the last week. I'm now just recovering from it dropping. My sister's wonderful. Her family's wonderful, but there are a lot of them, and they were very energetic, and they use a lot of milk.
Oh, really?
Most of it just ends up in the bowl in the sink when it's anyway. But it's fine to be away from family for a moment. None of them are home right now anyway, so it's great. This is good. I like hanging out with y'all.
Well, thank you so much, and we truly appreciate your time and appreciate you as a person.
You as a professor too. Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Appreciate everything that you do and you've done for all of us. I cannot think of anyone that I know, that we both know, who has anything bad to say about you. And whenever we mention your name, oh, Dan helped me with this, and then I learned something new about you, something that
exactly,
you can.
Yeah.
So you are
that's
our
humbling. Thank you.
Renaissance man. So yeah. We appreciate you, Dan. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, y'all.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
What a great person, huh?
Yes. He is a great man. Yeah.
Yeah. A wonderful individual, not just as a professor, but also as a human being. And,
he's the kind of person that inspires you to be a better person.
Absolutely.
Just by being the way he is.
And I know not just students, but also faculty and staff look up to Dan.
Mm-hmm.
Dan is the a doer. He's not someone who just says words, but he's someone who does and is willing to help in any way that he can. And he, at the end, he mentioned that, and I think that was really eye-opening, and it bothers him to see something the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always that sense of improvement, that desire to make things better.
Right.
Awesome. Chelsea, any advice for our students from, I don't know, as a student, what did you get from the meeting? If there was one piece of advice you'd like
listen
to
Dan McDonald. I just he inspires me to really just be better than I think I can be.
Wow.
So I think that we should all aspire to be like Dan.
Very
in the way we think.
Absolutely. Yeah. He definitely appreciates people's individuality. So whatever that might be, your better version, try to find that and work on it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, this has been fun, Chelsea.
Yes.
Play the music.
The music.
Yeah.
Roll it.
1, 2, 3. Okay. Bye.
Bye.